Chapter 4. Every once in a while it was time to go see a sister I loved, even though she was married to a man I could not stand. Of my three siblings, she lived closest, so was the one most likely to invite me over and expect a return invitation. But it had gotten harder to go see her, for her husband had risen far in the world, which made him more certain of his own opinions, of which he had many, and for which he had an unduly high regard. In my opinion, every time he opened his mouth he subtracted from human intelligence, but he made a great deal more money than me, which meant his opinions counted much more than my own, at least within my own family. They had a house in one of the new suburbs, out east where the city of Wichita had swallowed up a once sleepy farm town called Andover. It was hard to understand why people wanted houses 6,000 and 7,000 square feet. People didn't have large families anymore. You had to heat, cool, furnished, and be taxed upon the number of bedrooms, even if half of them were empty year-round. Even our houses have become obese. Every time I drove to their place, my school teacher's sensible Toyota, swimming in a sea of SUVs, I passed through the land of giant houses east of Wichita. A virtue of thrift, known in my parents' so-called greatest generation, had been discarded. Not discarded, but thrown out the window, regarded as a pinched and unimaginative way of living, something for losers. Luxury had become common, though big was mistaken for opulence and gaudy for style. That all the glitz was purchased with a waterfall of borrowed money seemed of no importance. I thought of W. after 9/11. From shock and need, he was handed the greatest political moment in any president since Pearl Harbor. The heart and soul of every citizen was waiting to be led. Just give us a direction, sir, and we will go. We will sacrifice and we will fight. But in that historic moment, our president looked the country in the eye and said, "Mr. and Mrs. America, your country needs you to get in your SUVs and go shopping." Never had so much moment been thrown away for so little. In that singular moment, a better man could have changed the country, maybe turned us on a dime. He could have made it our patriotic duty to conserve, to quit pouring money into the most unstable parts of the world for oil, since some of that tidal wave of wealth finds its way into the pockets of our worst enemies. A better man would have pointed out that conserve is the very root word of a certain brand of politics. And maybe for once we all could have agreed on the principle. A better man would have called upon and inspired our fabled American ingenuity to produce new and cleaner energy. A better man could have done all this with a few well-chosen words. But the better man, even with more votes, did not win the 2000 election. Their house was on a new street called Meadowlark Lane and was at least 8,000 square feet. They had 2 kids, but both were gone or going. Their oldest was doing Christian missionary work in Africa, an accepted form of evangelical adventure, and was engaged to be married upon her return. Her youngest was Travis, and he was the reason for my visit. Travis was in the army, and he was going to Iraq. This was his going-away party. "Teddy," said my sister Ellen, opening the front door and giving me a hug. "How nice of you to come." "Uncle Ted," said Travis just behind her, holding out his hand, as strong and healthy as I had ever seen him. The Army had saved this kid. He was in civvies, but even out of uniform you could tell he was a soldier, a Rick Baring with his white wall haircut now a bit grown out. On the piano was a picture of him in his dress uniform, taken just out of boot camp, for he wore no campaign or battle ribbons, only a marksman's badge. But all that had changed. His unit was among the first in Afghanistan. In an ambush outside Kandahar, he had saved 2 soldiers under fire. For this, he was up for a Bronze Star. Now his unit had been reassigned to Iraq. Travis looked clean that day. That was the word for him, clean, relaxed and strong. His teenage years had been awful in the usual ways, maybe in a reaction to his strict home life, maybe drugs or alcohol, a dare, a self-destructive streak, a love of the death animus, or a love of action. But 1 week shy of his 18th birthday, he stole a car. There was also a police chase. By the time all of this had been worked out, the judge gave Travis the classic choice, jail or the Army. That's how Travis joined, and the Army was a miracle, at least for this kid. He sobered up, straightened out, learned discipline, and was worked into superb physical condition. The nail-biting, sulky teenager was gone, replaced by a ramrod straight and strong young man, calmer and more confident than I had ever seen him. Maybe it was the fact that for now, for the first time in his life, he was doing important work. When we shook hands, his eyes were smiling, and his grip nearly crushed my own. "Uncle Ted," he said again, "what'd you bring me?" And he pointed at the little black ditty bag in my hand. "My usual going-away present this time. You don't have to take all 6. Just take one." "Always 6," he laughed and clapped me on the back. Over the years there were other presents, but I always gave him this, and yes, always 6. I set the bag on a table in that foyer with its 16-foot ceiling and saw that picture of him on what was actually a grand piano in that mini cathedral entrance. It reminded me that no one in this house played the piano. "Uncle Ted," he said a third time, "I'm so glad you're here." I had never seen him look better. A strong young man in the full flush of his young manhood. He introduced me to his girlfriend, whose name I promptly forgot. She was a pretty little blonde who spent the entire day within an arm's length of him, a look on her face that was eager, even worried that somehow she might displease him. "You didn't bring Lynn?" my sister asked. "She had something she had to do," I said, though it wasn't true. My wife had bigger problems with my brother-in-law than I did, and had begged off. "I can't take those Jesus shouters," she had told me more than once. "You'll just have to eat twice your share," said Travis. "Dad's got a hell of a barbecue going." "You bring your swimming suit?" asked my sister Ellen. "Nobody wants to see me in a swimming suit," I said. "In fact, they pay me to keep my clothes on." "Who does?" "The school board." She laughed and lightly touched my arm. Making my sister Ellen laugh was one of my few talents. If I could replicate her into an audience, I would consider a career as a comedian. Newcomers were arriving behind us, and I went into the next room, crossing a long floor of laminated oak, past a sectional sofa big as a houseboat, going further into this temple of plenty, funneled towards a room where a gigantic television hung on the wall. To one side, French doors were open to a patio. In every way, it was a large crowd. The fat of the land was here. Flesh oozed out of shorts that people never should have dreamed of wearing. From other trips I recognized people from their church and neighborhood. The scent of meat simmering on a grill and a whiff of chlorine from the pool came through the open doors, and the sun poured down through the oversized windows. I went outside where my brother-in-law Rich was standing in the sunshine, behind a gas grill big as a small truck, long silver spatula in one hand. "Ted," he said, and advanced on me with that smile he used in a salesman's job, arms open to hug me. "Decided to come out to God's country?" "I didn't know he lived in the suburbs," I said, offering my hand in order to decline his manly, sweaty embrace. Rich wasn't obese, actually, but he was big. Know how some guys try to crush your hand when you shake? Rich did this when he gave you one of his hugs. "There's every reason to believe the Lord likes it here best," he said, grabbing my hand. "God is fond of fertilized lawns?" "Oh, Ted," as he did his best to crush my fingers in a manly handshake, though his grip was nothing compared to his son's. "You're always such a cynic. Look at everything we have been blessed with." He waved the spatula at the house, the pool, the jacuzzi, the gigantic smoking grill, ice coolers full of soda, tables full of food. Kids and teenagers splashed in the pool, every seat on the patio filled with guests as more milled about, their chattering making a buzz in the summer afternoon. It was a perfect picture of American plenty. "You don't see the hand of God in this?" he asked, finally, regretfully, it seemed to me, giving up the handshake and the chance to crush me into submission. "It's just like I pictured the Old Testament," I told him, "especially the jacuzzi." "Oh, Ted, Ted, Ted," said my brother-in-law, as if he pitied my sorrowful and meager existence. "Every time I'm looking around, I am counting God's blessings, but all you ever do is mock." "Give me a hamburger, Rich." I grabbed a plate, hoping to end the conversation before he could drag me neck-deep into the holy water, as he's always trying to do. A few years ago, a baptism in the Spirit had become the key event in Rich's life. His joy in this was of the St. Bernard variety, overpowering. Like any good spirit-filled Christian, if he could inspire others to take the plunge, his place in heaven would be assured. So his hands were always reaching out to grab your soul and pray it clean. When born again, Rich became a lay preacher and major benefactor of a church built on East Kellogg, the Church of God and Christ of the Lamb. On occasion, he would take the pulpit and testify. He and my sister had always been religious. But dating from his awakening, this had gone into evangelical overdrive. This was also when I stopped to consider. About the same time, Travis began to act out. The church he built was only blocks from a car lot he owned. The pairing of salesman and preacher gave him the worst attributes of both trades. Pushy and pompous is what my wife called him. If famous, his dual career would have provided months of material for late-night comedians. On a local level, Rich actually was famous because of the commercials. The corny ads he had run for years had, I kid you not, a cross and a flag in the final tableau, small but strategically placed in the background. In the foreground were rows of the most wasteful vehicles ever made, stupendous hunks of metal, vaguely menacing in their very size. It surprised me Jesus wanted you to drive a Hummer. This did not seem a logical choice of transportation for the Savior, but my brother-in-law claimed to know him much better than me, so maybe it was so. In those years his business had boomed, which had the side effect of adding to his religious intensity. When God put his hand on Rich's life, those SUVs began to jump off the lot. Faith is a wondrous thing. I got a hamburger and went down the food line, past mountains of potato salads, buckets of macaroni, bowls of chips and dips, an entire table devoted to cakes and pies, and 100 other edibles. When my plate was full, I found an empty chair and a group at one end of the pool. It felt odd to be the smallest person in that group, for I am not a small man. The woman across from me had flesh so immense it folded into an obscene pattern below her knees. We talked about the weather and how the Kansas City Royals stunk again that year. But soon enough, we got around to the war. "Boy, we kicked us some ass and took names," said a man who I took to be the husband of the woman with mountainous knees. "Mess with the best and you die like the rest." "Uh-huh, that's right, got 'em good. What do you expect?" said people in the group. I could have stayed silent. No minds would be changed by anything I said that day. But being around my brother-in-law always brought out the devil in me. "I wish we'd got Bin Laden," is what I said first. "Oh, he's just up in a cave hiding somewhere," said the man, who wore a jean jacket vest over a short-sleeved plaid shirt. "He pokes his head up and he's going to get it blown the hell off." We only had one piece of business in that part of the world, I observed. Kill the sumbitch responsible and come home. Everything else is just going to multiply our troubles. "Oh, we had to go there," said someone. "Iraq?" I asked, and the group murmured their assent. "That's multiplication," I told them, "not subtraction." There was a silence for a moment. Then the man in the jean vest said, "Well, every once in a while you gotta let these sumbitches know who's boss." This brought a wave of assent from the heavy hitters around that end of the pool. Now, why point out the difference between Saddam and Bin Laden? That great con game had gone down almost without a hitch, exchanging one for the other, as a whole shell-shocked country sleepwalked into the wrong war for the wrong reasons. "Look how fast we took Baghdad," said a different man. "In what, a month, 6 weeks?" "Every war is popular for the first 6 weeks," I said. This brought more silence from the group. By then it was easy enough to see keeping Iraq was going to be a lot harder than taking Iraq. As the toll became steady, what was glorious had become messy, horrible, uncontrollable, and was beginning to have the look of something endless and expensive. The invasion had given Al-Qaeda the greatest recruitment gift they could ever receive. It accelerated the atomic ambitions of its rogue religious neighbor to its east, a kingdom of Shiites, and the man who was our president did not even know the difference between them and the Sunnis, whom he had now twice invaded. Kill Bin Laden and come home. Instead, with our great American know-how and rah-rah, we were going to fix that part of the globe. Given the GOP hands on the wheel, this was ironic tragedy on multiple levels. But why point this out? It was Travis's day, and if Ellen and Rich were going to see their only son put his life on the line, they were walking the walk. Somebody said, "We needed to get Saddam." And before I could stop myself, I was in schoolteacher mode. Let's see. Saddam didn't have a Navy, didn't have an Air Force, didn't have WMDs, even though we were told he did, sworn to that he had them, would never allow religious fanatics to camp out in his country, and to top it off, had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. What's your point? Demanded one of the 300-pounders in the circle. It wasn't Saddam who flew those planes into the World Trade Center, I told him. And every night, before you go to bed, I want you to whisper, "Land war in Asia. Land war in Asia." And every cup of coffee our boys drink has to be flown in from here. I didn't point out the intergenerational dynastic pissing match going on between Saddam and the Bushes, or the military-industrial profit motive in the equation, or repeat Jack's point about WMDs. No, I had already said plenty. Another silence began to play out. The man in the jean jacket vest speared up some meat and began to chew before asking, "What would you do if we caught bin Laden? Sue him? Is that what you would do?" If taken alive, we should put him in a pen full of pigs, for his soul will never make it to Muslim heaven if he touches swine. That very thing once stopped a war. This seemed to mollify them, and they all nodded grimly. Maybe I was a red-blooded white man after all and could be trusted. We all turned our attention to the food on our plates. Then somebody in the group asked in a general kind of way, "Did you watch the convention?" Oh, boy. That very week the Republicans had met in New York, and speaker after speaker said the name Saddam Hussein, this way one might say Hitler, Stalin, or bubonic plague. From the stage in Madison Square Garden, the name was said over 800 times. But the name Osama bin Laden, the man responsible for Ground Zero, a place not 2 miles from where all these people stood, was never spoken out loud, not once. Even for politicians, the level of this dishonesty was appalling, the hypocrisy staggering in magnitude. Facts had become shockingly irrelevant. To catch a glimpse of Dick Cheney with his 5 draft deferments, a chicken hop parading as warrior, was world-class down-the-rabbit-hole chutzpah. What Bush and his people had done before made me mad. What they did that week made me almost as furious as Jack. "It's obvious to me," said the man in the vest, "that God gave us George Bush." "That's right. Amen. Hand to God," said the group. In the summer of 2004 in the state of Kansas, indeed all over the country, people of religious persuasion said this with great sincerity. They were not bad people. My life had been lived around these people, my family chief among them. The good ones didn't cheat or steal and would stop to help you if you got a flat tire on a country road. I have known the really good ones to take in strangers who needed help, to feed, clothe, and pray over broken people for their lives to be healed. Good or bad, Christians were usually the first to show up when loved ones passed. But both kinds of Christians almost never left off judging you and your relation or lack thereof to the Almighty. Almost to a one, they believe the end times are upon us, when the world will be destroyed, the wicked punished, and the good taken off to heaven. This belief has been stated to me so often I have developed a syllogism to explain its logic. I am alive now, therefore it must be the most important epoch in the history of the world, and therefore Jesus will return before I die. When speaking of the end times, they had a barely suppressed glee. One fine day, bad things will happen to all the bad people. Sinners would be judged and maimed, tortured and killed, thrown into the fiery pit with their backs broke, while they, the righteous, would be up in heaven drinking iced tea with Jesus and probably watching some football. It was something I came to think of as Christian porn. Before I could stop myself, I blurted out the awful truth. Does it occur to you that maybe God gave us George W. Bush in order to punish us? Forks seemed to stop in midair. Chins jerked up into attention. Throats were cleared. If I had let loose with a 60-second fart, I could not have gotten more attention. An apostate had been found, tossed into the Temple of Plenty right there on Meadowlark Lane. The silence was like a pall. The 300-pounders and their mates stirred in agitation. Finally, the woman with the obscene knees said, "Well, I never! Do we got us a bleeding heart here?" "You know," I told them, "you can change 1,000 minds with emotion before you can change a single mind with fact. The trouble is there are no facts anymore. There are only interpretations." "What did you just say?" asked the man in the jean jacket vest. "Excuse me, I need more soda." I rose and left the circle. Why swat the hornet's nest? I could no more change minds with logic than I could make water run uphill. I went through the food line again and loaded down a plate with stuff I didn't need. At the other end of the patio I found an empty chair, sat down and ate so much that for a couple of hours I was insensate and couldn't move. When I dragged myself inside, I ran into my sister on one side of a kitchen counter, a counter so huge it was referred to not as an island, but a continent. It was covered with more dishes of food. I kissed her cheek and thanked her for the party. Experience demanded a pit stop before the drive home. Downstairs were 3 bathrooms, but all were occupied or with a line, so I went up the stairs. It was the first time I had been upstairs in their house. The carpet seemed to swallow my ankles. Its softness made me want to walk on it with bare feet. The upstairs bathroom had a huge tub with recessed jets. I wondered how many gallons it could hold. The word Romanesque occurred to me. When I went back toward the stairs, I heard the ping-ping boom of a video game. A bedroom door was ajar, and I saw Travis behind a computer screen, his girlfriend at his elbow. He looked up, caught sight of me, and called out for the 4th time that day, "Uncle Ted!" "What are you playing?" I asked as I went in. He gave me some name that had war in the title. On the screen, 2 monsters were fighting. Then the picture changed, and a man was blowing up a tank half hidden in trees. Travis kept his eyes on the screen and kept playing. "Does any of this," and I waved my hand at the screen, "help you be a soldier?" "No way, not in infantry. Maybe if you're in Skate City running the drones. But all that there," and he pointed at the screen, "it's just candy. You ain't crawling around facing the dirt hoping you don't get shot." "So even simulated action—" "You can't simulate action," he said, never taking his eyes from the screen, his thumbs flying around the handheld device. "It doesn't count unless they're shooting back?" "Nope," and he nodded absently. "That gets your attention, oh yeah." He played the game a moment and then added, "And here's the problem, Uncle Ted." One hand flew from the joystick, and he held 2 fingers an inch from my belly. Boom! You never saw it coming. He gave me a sly, embarrassed grin and folded his gun fingers back into the console. His eyes went back to the game as explosions came from the screen. His girlfriend and I exchanged a glance, but I couldn't remember her name. Then my eyes found the shelves on the wall above the screen. "Hey, are those—" And I looked closer. Long rows of books were meticulously set out. If I was not mistaken, they were in chronological order, all that I had given him over the years, 6 at a time, and I had to ask, "Are these all of them?" "Yeah," he said without looking up from the game. "How many of them have you read?" "Oh," he said and kind of laughed. I thought he was going to say none, but then he said, "You might be surprised," and looked up and smiled. He had my sister's smile, a smile she got from our mother. In it was something warm and natural, a simple joy that was beautiful. It always irked me my sister got our mother's smile, for I could never find the right one when a camera was around. Most pictures seemed to show me in pain. But it didn't bother me that Travis had inherited the good smile from her bloodlines. I was touched he'd saved these books and had them on display. Neither of us knew what to say, and his eyes went back to the screen, the room quiet except for the explosions of the game. "The Army seems to suit you." "I like it," he said simply, his eyes not leaving the screen. "You turning into an action junkie?" "Maybe." His eyes cut a quick glance at me. On the screen his icon got blown up and now lay dead in a simulated alley. The game went into pause mode. Reaching for a can of soda, he said, "I like being with my buddies." That's what you always end up fighting for, I said. Travis hit a button and the game reset. The figures on the screen began to move again. Sometimes being a soldier is the most important thing a man can do. I can't say I'm going to make it my career, Uncle Ted, but I don't mind going over. I really don't. Thank you, I told him. Oh, knock it off, he said. We both know how I wound up in the army. We laughed. No, I mean it, I said. Good for you. This both embarrassed and pleased him. His eyes went back to the game. I should go, I said. Now he put the game on pause mode, stood up, and we had a hug. Take care of yourself. I'll do my best. Remember what they say, don't volunteer. Too late, he said. We're all volunteers. Then he sat down again, and his thumbs began flying all over that handheld control. The T-shirt he was wearing stretched across his ripped chest.